Imposter syndrome is a subject that comes up quite regularly when you're working with startup founders. If understood, if managed, it can be quite healthy, actually, particularly if a founder has long been an expert in their own field and they're starting to expand into a new world, particularly a commercial world. But at times, quite often, it can hinder our aspirations. And I think as individuals, as a university, and as a region, sometimes we can still compare ourselves unfavorably to other clusters or cities around the world, say Cambridge, Silicon Valley, and we let it put a dampener on those aspirations. So for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to go through some perspectives and some case studies to hopefully demonstrate why Bristol, right here and right in this time, is probably the most exciting place that you could be considering scaling your work, scaling your innovation through enterprise for genuinely global reaching impact. You'll also see some great examples of how the university is really starting to and continuing to lean in to provide the support and resources to give another step change to help you on your journey, if this is a journey you're going on. So I'm Marty Reid. I'm part of the enterprise services team, and we provide support and facilities to help innovators in the university take that jump and scale through entrepreneurship and enterprise. We lead the Engine Shed facility down by Temple Meads, which is the leading enterprise hub in the region. And unlike the innovation centres or incubators of other institutions or universities, ours is embedded in the business and civic community of the city. And that allows us, our peers, to share ideas and the benefit of what we do with the communities around us. Our team also deliver a whole range of support programs, from training packages with early career researchers, incubation support to help later stage researchers considering the commercialization step, through to our flagship SETsquared Bristol program, where we support global ventures to scale and grow from Bristol. I thought I would start with some data and reference points on investment and funding going into the city region and our companies right now. Now, I always say up front, investment is a really imperfect measure of impact, and it's absolutely not the only way that you can scale innovation. I'm not saying that for a second, but it's a really good relative measure of external perception of the value and potential, particularly commercial value, in our work here in the cluster. It also shouldn't be discounted in terms of direct value in terms of scaling impact. I mean, if you hear Matt's talk or some of the funding and work that other speakers over the course of the day will be doing, the funding tends to flow into talent, into resources to help that innovation scale. And also, if you follow SETsquared or our peers on social media or follow our newsletters, you'll see us shout about it a lot. It's because it's the big numbers, if you're doing well, are a great vehicle to attract talent, to attract further business, to attract engagement into the city, so that we are the hub people are coming to see. If you look at the numbers, something quite remarkable has happened in the Bristol cluster with the university at its heart over recent years. In the early 2010s, other than one or two superstar spin-outs and cases, the values of investment in the city region would have been measured in tens of millions. Now, that wouldn't have been paid attention in Whitehall or across the UK, never mind in Europe of the world. Then something remarkable has happened in the last few years. From 2017 to 2020, the average investment from angels and venture capital into companies in the city has averaged at over 300 million year on year consistently. And last year in 2021, it passed 1.1 billion. Now, if you want a bit of a relative feel of where that stands in the world, just a couple of weeks ago, Tech Nation published a report highlighting the size of clusters so far. And so far in 2022, Bristol is neck and neck with Oxford as the only UK cities outside London in the top 20 in Europe for funding raised. And that's actually been consistent for the last few years. Actually, we've been trending closer to the top 15 cities in Europe. Now, I don't know how impactful that is for you, but there's quite a lot of cities, big innovation clusters with universities or not around Europe. We are at the very top table. The investment and finance world is coming here to find and fund innovations that they think can scale globally. So the numbers are exciting. It does a lot for a reputation. It suggests a lot of potential. But actually, as an engineer originally, that's not the bit that really excites me. It's the what and the why that really, why I think this is maybe just the beginning. You can imagine with these numbers and this level of growth, we have a lot of people coming to see us, having round tables. This was the science minister from earlier in the year coming to Bristol to ask, what is happening here? And people often want to know what our specialisms are. You know, media, government departments like to be able to categorize and put specialisms in boxes, even if it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, but we understand why. Now, that's a question that Bristol, and actually the West of England region, has struggled with a little bit in the past, because we have great specialisms in some ways. We've got the traditional aerospace cluster. There was a big wave of embedded electronics, but actually our work, what we're most proud of, tends to defy those characterizations. And actually, I think we're all gaining confidence in recent years that it is that rejection of narrow specialism that is probably our strength. Culturally, we embrace interdisciplinary collaboration that creates the most exciting innovation. And if you look at the investments in facilities or capabilities today in the city region, we've tend to have targeted the intersection of specialist areas. And as I say, that is not only creating the most exciting ventures that we champion today, but I would go a step further and say that we are starting to create the industries of the future. And I'll pick a couple of case studies. So, starting with the creative technologies sector, this collision of the incredible depth of art and creative talent in the city. There's over 150 film and TV production companies based in the city, and not just in the incredibly well-known natural history unit. That is a big cluster, coming together with the digital, the deep tech, the broader research capabilities in the city, not least of all from the university. You may have well come across Ultraleap, Ultra Haptics, when they spun out of the university, and they're a great case study in this field. They have brought to, actually, I'd heartily recommend you go and watch Tom Carter's Enterprise Sessions video, not just for Michelle's fabulous hosting on that series, but Tom gives an incredibly candid account of his journey from an idea in his master's through his PhD, through to the journey of commercialization, scaling it with support in SETsquared, to building a company today where he's taken over as CEO that has hundreds of staff split between the UK and the US, and has raised over 150 million in venture capital. And it's still headquartered just down the road at Temple Quay. Now, those numbers are probably why we go to it as a case study. But if you think about the capability and its impact, they've brought together world-leading in-air haptic feedback technology, that potential to feel and touch objects and control systems in the air that aren't there and have sensory feedback. That's the technology that was spun out of the University of Bristol, and they've brought it together with world-leading hand tracking technology, down to individual digits and joints in your hand, through acquiring a US spin-out. And even that, it's quite nice that we're at the point where the Bristol company is going and buying out the Silicon Valley one to bring into our portfolio. Now, those two capabilities together start helping me understand how control systems or natural interaction systems of the future could start moving virtual reality or augmented reality from a niche area into the mainstream. At an earlier stage of the journey, in the city, we've got a company called Condensed Reality. Now, they're not a spin-out of the university from a pure commercialization standpoint, but they were founded by a Bristol graduate and are already doing a lot of work with research teams in the university, including the Marwold program. Now, They, and bear with me on this description, capture volumetric video, condense and process it, and transfer it into 3D environments, into 3D engines in real time. So I had to read that a few times, but imagine me here, this room, and I'm being filmed by cameras that can capture my movement in 3D, condense, transfer, process the video, and transmit me in real time into multiple 3D environments that could be viewed by people on phones, in virtual reality, on big screens, so that this experience could be shared in any environment. Maybe a better case study might be the Elton John concert. That might be a bit more exciting for people, that happened at Ashton Gate a few days ago, or theatre in the Bristol Old Vic, or a sports match, or a couple of steps further, maybe a surgery or an operating theatre in a hospital. With just those two case studies, we can maybe get a different perception on the metaverse. Now, metaverse is still a term that makes me shudder a little bit in its use, probably because of the connection to a certain Silicon Valley leader and his slightly creepy 3D avatar that we've seen on TV and on social media. But instead of that perspective, if we take the perspective of just these two case studies alone of our creative tech cluster, and I picked two and it could have been many, you start seeing the metaverse as the genuine collision of the virtual and physical environments in a new type of interaction. And if we in Bristol are creating the building blocks and the architecture of that new industry, which could be the future of entertainment, of education, of training, of a whole host of fields, if that's being grown here, think of the potential, no, the need for behavioral science, for how humans will interact and understand these new forms of media. Data science, electronics for sure, but also ethics applied in a commercial environment to make sure that we're doing these things for the right reasons. And that's before you even talk about the incredible potential for the next generation of artists that will need, or creators that need guided and could come out and spin out of the university to join this field. Now, part of the problem of this talk I found is that when we're talking about these inciting sectors, we could cover just about anything. There are so many different areas coming out of the university, and it'll always upset people by missing out their own field. But I'm just going to use a couple more examples. If we look at the traditional aerospace cluster, that is in recent years really starting to collide with the digital, the research and development, the deep tech that's being born in the other parts of the city. And there are so many case studies of incredible work and spin-outs. You know, MATS could actually be a real case study in its own. But if I pick one that hasn't come out of the university itself, but shows the potential for our work here in the region, Vertical Aerospace, formed and founded just a couple of miles down the road, actually in St. Philip's is their HQ at the moment, near where the new campus is going to be. They are developing an electric vertical and takeoff landing aircraft, which they're positioning as the future of urban air mobility. Now, there's a lot of big companies in the world, from Boeing to Airbus to everyone else, having a go at this right now. But last year, Vertical Aerospace raised over £200 million and are now listed on the New York Stock Exchange. As I said, based down the road, the CEO and president is a graduate of the University of Bristol. Now, with that backing, with the rooting into the traditional aerospace cluster and our digital economy, they've got a real shot at being the go-to platform to transform air travel as we know it. Now, if that happens and is born here in the city, it'll go global. There'll be sites all over the world, but right here will be the anchor where, all right, we'll have a need for new battery technologies, new materials. We're also going to have a real need for environmental science scaling up hugely. Again, behavioral science, perhaps modeling of cities. This could change the way transport systems work. The work of people in this room and our peers has such potential and a need for it to be deployed into these new industries. Now, some faces in the room will smile at me when I say I'm not going to have enough time to go into and cover all the wonderful case studies in the life sciences. other than to just note or point out the incredible work SETscience creates, an amazing incubator for emerging deep tech and life sciences companies. Now, that kind of facility could exist and does exist elsewhere in the UK and the world, but very, very few, or any I've heard of, have been founded and built from the ground up by a founder who spun out of the university, raised nigh on £500 million, and then is using that to lean back in and support the next generation of talent. The Bristol Robotics Lab, Future Space, giving that infrastructure in similar ways, or just a minute's walk down the road, the pilot space for the Quantum Tech Innovation Centre. That's been home to the QTech and Quest programs, who have created 28 deep tech and quantum businesses in recent years. That's a full third of the UK's quantum-enabled businesses, grown from a place a minute from here and on the doorstep with potential for us all to play a part in. So if I try and summarize and bring that together for why I'm really excited and why we should all be really excited to part of what's going on here right now. So we are part of an institution that is really starting to lean in and give support and resources like never before. We are part of a university and a cluster that the finance and investment world are paying attention to and are willing to provide capital to help innovation scale up and grow. We are part of a cluster in Bristol that embraces, supports, and specializes in interdisciplinary innovation and work that is creating future industries.